Thank you so much, Edlane. Hope everyone is doing well. I appreciate the opportunity to be here with you. For those of you on this webinar that are not familiar with NMHC, I'll take a second just to give you a sense of who the council is and what we do here in Washington. NMHC is the leading trade group across the country that represents owners, operators, developers of the apartment industry. Typically 5+ multifamily units. Many of our owners are big brand names that you know, but we have a significant population of owners that go, to the much smaller scale, operate across every jurisdiction in the country, and operate properties of all types, which lends itself very well to this conversation. Clearly, as Adeline did a great job giving you a sense of where the market is in terms of demand and what we see coming down the pike in terms of the need for supply, new supply, but also a key piece of meeting the housing demand in this country is preservation of existing housing stock. So I think Adeline's exactly right in focusing on that opportunity in the brownfield space. But for us, our core membership being the owner, operator, developer, that is how we approach technology. We do have supplier partners, many of whom are on this call today, and we appreciate, the work they do in ensuring connectivity at our properties. And so I thought today what I would do is really build off of where Adeline took us and talk about managed Wi-Fi and broadband service from the from the residents' perspective, which emphasizes why the ownership and operators across multifamily take broadband so seriously. So as many of you know, we do every 2 years, we do a renter preferences survey report. It's the largest in the country. This survey from 22 looked at over 220,000 resident responses, 12 of the largest apartment companies, nearly 5,000 properties. And what you see is not going to surprise you. Renters love internet. They value high-speed internet. And, each year we see that tick up. Now, if you're in some climate challenged areas of this country, air conditioning may eke out the win by a point or two, but broadband typically is there at the top of the list. This stat says itself, says everything for you. We won't rent without high-speed internet, 54%. That too ticks up. And I think we'll get to a demographic slide here in a little bit. But what do they do daily on the internet? This will come as no surprise either. I think streaming video, I think what the pandemic really taught us was how central someone's home is to their ability to live, entertain, educate, access healthcare, and so on. So all of these things put together, really have tested the networks that we've had in place. Fortunately, during the pandemic, multifamily did extremely well. I think that's because of the investments on both the provider and the operator and owner side of multifamily to really support these consumer preferences and demands. And then most, in the overwhelming majority, 86% renters are satisfied with their internet, or at least neutral. Dissatisfied, those who are dissatisfied, we polled the 13% who said they were dissatisfied. Some wanted a different internet provider if there was choice at the property, or if it was a bulk system and they wanted choice. Too many service outages, something that I think we can all appreciate and we'll touch on throughout this webinar. And then it doesn't fully support my needs for whatever reason. And I think that's something that our ownership is extremely sensitive to, especially in such a highly competitive and tight multifamily market. Resident satisfaction across the board is extremely important. And then top 3 factors when evaluating service, we see reliability, clearly key, cost of service, another 64%, and then speed, 74%, which I know we'll touch on later today. But oftentimes we at NMHC joke that most people don't know what a gigabit really is, but they appreciate the moniker or the buzzword around it and they glom onto it. So it is something that our owners do have to take into consideration when they're working to deploy service. And then how important is it to have your internet service available immediately on move-in? This is something we see very important or absolutely essential, 83%. I think that lends itself very well to this conversation today. And then absolutely essential is 48%. I think managed Wi-Fi, and we can talk on this during the panel too. Here you have 62% saying, they're interested in pre-installed Wi-Fi. They don't want to have to touch anything or have to deal with the back end or service providers or setting up accounts and so on. And when you look at the breakdown, interest in pre-installed Wi-Fi, it kind of flips where you have the younger folks who are willing to deal with routers and modems and so on. Older generations definitely are more hands-off and want it to be a seamless turnkey service, which lends itself well. And then we'll talk on this during the panel discussion as well. But obviously NMHC is predominantly a federally facing advocacy organization for the industry. So we track tech and telecom policy here in Washington, where I'm based. And I think there's a couple of big pieces that we continually monitor, but have some impact in this conversation. One is obviously the FCC, the Federal Communications Commission, the regulatory landscape around broadband deployment, adoption, access, and the way it ultimately regulates or oversees the market and interaction or relationship between broadband providers and property owners. The FCC about a year ago put out an updated set of rules that guide that relationship, most notably banning graduated revenue share agreements, but left much of the marketplace intact, which we took as a testament to how well multifamily is really doing in comparison to the broader consumer market when it comes to choice, availability, reliability, and so on. A really key program that we're focusing on right now with many of our housing partners is what's in DC known as the BEAD program. Many of our broadband providers on this call will know a lot about it. But this is a once in a lifetime historic opportunity that stems from President Biden's bipartisan infrastructure law, where Congress explicitly authorized low-income multifamily properties to benefit from historic $42.5 billion of broadband deployment funds. And in doing so, they specified that owners would be eligible to access that funding to provide things such as managed Wi-Fi, to provide reduced cost or free service to residents, upgrade or maintain infrastructure. Because as we have argued with the FCC or told the FCC for many years, the problem in multifamily broadband is not necessarily across the broader multifamily market. It is really hyper focused on that lower income band where the economics or the ROI is just not there for a provider to carry that expense on their own. And ultimately, the property owner is, especially in those segments of the market, the lower income space, really does not have the capital to be able to deploy on their own. So they really do need this government support. So we're working aggressively to make sure owners and providers are fully aware of the program as it gets rolled out through the states over the next year or so. And then relatedly is a key program for us on the renter side, the Affordable Connectivity Program. Right now, nearly 20 million American families benefit from this subsidy program. It is in danger of running out of funds over the next year. So we're working in coalitions to make sure that does not happen. But just yesterday, the Department of Housing and Urban Development here in DC and the FCC announced a new partnership and a data sharing agreement, which should boost eligibility and reduce some of the the enrollment barriers that we've seen, the paperwork requirements and so on for housing choice voucher recipients, some public housing residents, and then project-based rental assistance communities. So we are hopeful these three pieces together really ultimately support a lot of the good work that the providers here are doing. And then I think, when we look at these issues and digital divide and the way managed Wi-Fi really has a role to play in eradicating that, especially at the lower income space of our industry, we really look at things like housing equity. It's no longer, for so long, the industry is focused on housing affordability and supply, our bread and butter issues. But we have at NMHC really taken a step back and put out a new report in June, Opening Doors of Opportunity, a guide to improving housing equity. And it really, one key part of that is broadband deployment, adoption, and access. And if folks are interested in that, I'm happy to drop the link to that report in the chat. But it's a guide for both industry stakeholders and policymakers to understand how we can actually ensure housing is a vehicle of opportunity, and clearly broadband is a key piece of that. And so I'll close here and turn it back to the other speakers. As always, NMHC hosts one of the leading industry tech and operations conferences, November 1st to 3rd at the Wynn in Las Vegas this year. Much of what we will be talking about today will be a very hot topic and packed rooms, I'm sure, at this year's OpTech. So with that, Adeline, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you, Kevin. Exactly 10 minutes. I congratulate you. Thank you so much. Amazing presentation. Thanks.